She's the audience.
All right, I'm starting it on Streamlabs. Okay, and we got the media going. Starting it. Facebook and YouTube. All right, and now I'll check to make sure that it's running. Facebook. All right, and we are live. Go ahead, Tom.
Happy Friday, everybody. Tom Monahan from General Finishes, and today we're in the spray booth for our second part of spraying the General Finishes product line. Today we're going to focus just on the paints and primers. There's so many products to discuss, but I think it's really important that we just start off with the basics and talk about the different types of primers that we make and why you should use one over the other. And then, so we're going to spray some primer today, and we're also going to spray some of the pigmented top coats. And at the end, we should be able to show you a finished door and just give you some more options or possibilities of thinking about what you want to use. Everything starts with safety, so first things first. Make sure you got a proper respirator for spraying paint. Personally, I wear the RZ mask. It's a double filtered mask, but it's comfortable for me, because I wear glasses. But get yourself a proper N95 mask for respirator for particles, and also make sure you get the right size, because the most uncomfortable thing is to wear the wrong size respirator all day long, and you'll know right away because it won't seal tight on you. These are 3 different types of respirators, and this one kind of fits right over the head, but it's a nice snug fit. So find one for you, try them on. If you don't like it, you can go get another one. These all retail in about the $30 range. It's a good investment for you. So make sure you change your filters when they're dirty, okay? Just going to put those down. And the topic about paint and primers comes up, and I think this is a good way to start if you're just getting involved in doing kitchen cabinets or furniture. Spraying is going to make you more money, plain and simple. But there's so many options available. Let's talk about why we would choose one over the other. And General Finishes manufactures 2 superb primers. And the basic primer would be like the white undercoat. This is for the kitchen cabinets that if you're doing a maple door, spraying white poly, this would be the base coat that you start with. And this is just an example. White undercoat, this is actually by a manufacturer in Wisconsin, pre-prime millwork. They use the white undercoat because it covers so well, but it sands very easy. It's loaded with filler, but it sands really nice, and people really like that. This is the back side, and this is the reason why they use it. This is a finger jointed piece of poplar, and not only the color differentiation, but the fact that they have to hide that seam, so that when they get to these boards, they're running up to 16-foot lengths, and they can cover that with the white undercoat, and this has actually got our white top coat on it. But you can see that the seam disappears, so that's the reason why they use the white undercoat. Most of the cabinet shops that are spraying our products usually start with white undercoat as a base coat. And I've got the stain blocking primer is a newer product for us. Maybe in the last couple of years we put it onto the market. This was more of a demand by our consumers that needed a product that's going to help block stains or discolorations from oak kitchen cabinets, or maybe they're finishing a mahogany Duncan Fife set and they want to paint it white. And I'm going to show you in a minute why that's not always a good idea. But the whole point about the stain blocker too is to block off the discoloration you get from the tannins or the color of the wood that you're painting over. Okay? The other thing about, I just want to talk about mixing the material. You know, you can use a drill with a mixer on it just to be able to get the products mixed thoroughly before you spray them. The viscosities of the material are spray grade ready. The white undercoat's a little heavier bodied because of the filler content. I normally don't even reduce the stain blocking primer, and I'm going to shoot that also today. It sprays really well right off the gun. So again, anytime we recommend, if you're going to use thinning, very little amount of water, but we have the extender and the accelerator that are part of the process if you need to use them. But we're going to shoot them straight unreduced out of the can today. Okay, I'm going to step back over here. So this is going to be this is a pine board, and I grabbed this board on purpose. is the knots, the big giant knots. And people are, we're okay? People are wanting to paint furniture, pine furniture, paint cabinetry, and to hide the knot. But I want to demonstrate why stain blocking primer becomes a critical point, because it'll help stop the bleed through. And I'm going to show you snow white milk paint versus stain blocker, and you're going to see within about 30 minutes the color is going to bleed right through. It's quite remarkable. So we're all set. I'm just going to put my mask on and just spray for a few minutes, and I'm going to turn the fan on, then we'll talk after we're done here. So I'm going to shoot snow white milk paint first. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but it's already starting to turn pink. That tells you if this was a kitchen or a dining room table or a dresser, this is actually going to, can you see that?
Yeah, bring it down a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, there we go.
You got it?
Tilt it a little bit towards me, up top. There you go.
Can you see it turning pink while we're talking here? That is something that is an indication that you don't want to just paint white over top of something that's red, because you're going to get pink, all right? So the key with this is, and I'm going to say from experience, the normal habit would be put another coat of paint on it, and another coat of paint, and another coat of paint, and it doesn't make any difference. This is going to bleed through. So I'm going to just switch this around. And now I'm going to spray the stain blocker. And the stain blocker is going to do two things. It's going to help bury that knot, but it's going to stop that bleed through. And again, I'm just going to switch guns here. And again, I'll put my mask on, and then we'll spray, and then I'll exhaust for a minute, and then just let you take a look at it here. Okay. Turn down the air. Exhaust. Now, can you see the difference of those two? That board is going to stay white. Now, I would come back in a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours, and put another coat on. But I want this one to dry. I think I mentioned last week about the very first coat of product you lay down dries the longest. I want that to completely dry out, because that's where you're blocking off the color from bleeding through. The stain blocker is a premium primer, meaning it's more expensive, but it does something that most primers don't do, and that is stop and neutralize the transfer of color coming through when you're painting over an existing finish. And I have a cabinet door I'll do, but I want to show you the reason for using stain blocking primers. It's becoming, I think, the most critical thing in today's market. People painting oak kitchen cabinets and just throwing white paint on there and coming back in a couple months and saying everything's discolored and turned yellow. We're going to show you why. Look at how pink that top one is. It's actually quite dramatic. So we're going to set this off to the side, and this will dry. We'll air dry. We'll just set this off to Chris. Okay? Thank you. I want to talk about painting existing cabinets, though, because this is kind of the hottest trend right now. Is everybody's, well, because of COVID, everybody's home and they got a lot of time on their hands. Paint my kitchen cabinets. Most of them have builder-grade oak cabinets, so we have great video links on our YouTube channel, but if you go to generalfinishes.com, you can check out all the resources that we have put there for you if you're going to do a project like that do a little research, watch our videos, and then you should have a successful outcome. So on something like this, we're talking about using denatured alcohol and a Scotch-Brite pad to clean the surface. And we want to do that to get rid of all the oils and the grease that's on the existing cabinets. And kitchen cabinets can get pretty grungy over a period of 15 to 20 years. But give them a good thorough cleaning. You don't have to take all the finish off. If you choose to do so, you know, that's your prerogative, but just get them cleaned down to where you got a good solid base that's not going to cause any type of peeling or lifting. If the finish is intact, leave it there. What you got today?
Question from Keith. Does stain blocker prevent sap/resin bleed through on pine?
Well, that's a good point. I want to show you something, Keith, because my wife has a sign business and we do everything out of pine. And we base coat paint these with lamp black milk paint and to help bury that knot. But that knot is always going to slowly fight its way to the surface. The stain blocker will minimize it, and if nothing else, give you at least years worth of satisfaction compared to weeks, if not days, if not minutes, with that knot bleeding through. Think about the paint industry's been in business for 150 years. Nobody's quite figured out exactly how to stop Mother Nature from showing that knot through. And that's just coming from experience. But the stain blocker definitely minimizes the transfer of color. Okay? So I cleaned this, prepped it, did it with the denatured alcohol and the Scotch-Brite pad. And now I'm just going to spray, I want to spray the stain blocker over top of it. Okay? But get rid of the dust. And again, if you've noticed, I've had to mark each individual cup because I got white products in 3 different guns. And if it's been a long day, you're going to grab the wrong gun. I promise you that. Okay, and I'm just going to put my mask on and I'm going to spray the stain blocker over this oak door. Okay. Exhaust. If you've noticed, I've got a turntable, and if you're doing a kitchen or if you're doing a larger project, even in your garage, invest $15, $20 in a turntable. This is just used parts from another cabinet, and I just have a $12 turntable on here. But if you notice, I stand still and I rotate the door 360. That does 2 things. It keeps the gun consistent with my fan pattern, so I'm not constantly adjusting or rotating my gun. I want my gun to remain fixed, which lays down a much more uniform, consistent film. And that just becomes practice if you're spraying. A turntable will actually save you energy because you're not moving around the piece. You let the piece turn around in front of you. Okay? Now, here's a question that come up. Can you see the open grain in this door? I'm going to say that's an option that you have. If you want to grain fill that, by all means, you can grain fill it. Personally, I wouldn't because it's not worth the time and the investment on an oak kitchen cabinet. If they're oak, they're always going to look like oak, and eventually that grain will transfer through. It may telegraph slightly, but it's never going to look like a maple door. Let's just put it that way. There are some products on the market that work really well for grain fillers, and I would highly recommend that you try one first, and you'll quickly realize it's a lot of work for little return. So now we'll just set this off and we'll let that dry. And I have I'm going to bring this up here. I just have this kind of display of an existing kitchen cabinet door with a factory finish on it, stained factory finish. This is actually the stain blocker, and I want to show you the difference in color here because this has actually got the white poly on it. But the stain blocker is kind of an off-white, almost gray color tone, and that tells me two things. It tells me that it's reacted with the tannins in the wood and kind of locked off the tannins. It goes through a chemical process. And the stain blocker contains a couple of key ingredients that chemically react with tannins. That's why it's different than just a standard hardware store paint and primer in one. So if you're going to invest the time and money in doing something like this, invest the time and the money in the right type of product, and you're going to end up with a much better outcome at the end. Marcy.
Bill asks, is there any benefit to letting the stain blocker cure for a long time before applying paint/top coat?
Well, it's a good question, because I'm a firm believer in allowing the first coat of primer to dry. And if you're not in a hurry, it doesn't hurt to allow it to dry 4, 6, 12 hours. It can go 24 hours. It doesn't matter. But if you're doing this to get it done, what you want to avoid doing is going from primer to paint to top coat all within a 3 or 4 hour period, like a lot of people do. You have to let the product do what it's engineered to do, and that is by allowing it to dry itself out. I'm going to tell you, this door was done months ago, so I could sand this door and paint it today without any adverse effect. Never hurts to be patient. That's really a good point. But can you see the progression here? If you can go, these are the same doors actually. This is the same door here. And then we did stain blocker with our white poly flat top coat on it. I think that tells the story, okay? Anybody else? A question about how many coats would I put on in primer? I would always follow my instincts and think if I look like I can get it done with one. I have a maple door here that has one primer on it, and I'll show you. But normally, if you're going over existing finishes, usually 2 coats. Because 2 coats in builds your protective layer, but also allows for, if the first coat you didn't get 100%, and this is a good example, down inside the grooves here, or where the door frame panel meets, it needs another coat to cover up that area. Because when that door shrinks, you're going to get that color line from not having enough primer on. But normally 2 coats of primer on existing finishes, or the wood species too. The oak has quite a bit of tannins in them. They're going to bleed through regardless. 2 coats of paint, or 2 coats of primer, and then typically 2 coats of paint. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's just move on here. Now, this is the other example. This is a brand new maple decorative cabinet door. It's been sanded, prepped for paint and priming. Normally, on hard maple like this, they're so smooth and slick, I'm usually going to go about 180, 220 if I need to do some detail, but what you want to avoid with priming is over sanding. Because if I get my surface too slick and too polished, then the paint doesn't have anything mechanically to actually grab a hold of. So some of the problems that people can run into is they over sand before they paint. Now we're going to spray this, and then I have a door already primed, and I'm going to sand it and show you how we should sand the primer. Marcy.
Is there a, excuse me, can stain blocker be tinted is the first question.
No. I'll tell you why.
Okay, and then the second question is, can you do this in sunlight without issues?
No. So the questions are, can the stain blocker be tinted? No, and the reason for it is the chemistry of the stain blocker is unique. It's not just a run-of-the-mill water-based acrylic primer. It's a fairly sophisticated resin system that was developed, and the reason for it is it was the one system that we found that actually performed the function of blocking out tannins and bleed-through. So we don't tint the stain blocker. We can tint all the other pigmented products. And then the second coat is sunlight. Are you talking about, is the piece that's been painted directly exposed to sunlight, like in a kitchen?
She's sounds like she's saying, can she do this process in the sunlight? Can she do
No,
this?
I'm going to say that is not a good idea. Sorry for blowing that idea there. Here's the reason why. I don't like painting. Let's just, for instance, today it's 92 degrees outside, beautiful sunny day. I understand why you'd want to work outside, but you're going to adversely affect how the products spray and level and dry. So if you're going to work in an environment, always think about, you want to work in something that's a controlled environment, whether it be inside or air conditioned. If it's in a garage, you're out of the sun, but the key is the sun can actually heat the surface of the wood. I would just suggest, take a board and lay it out in your driveway, go get it after lunch and come back and feel the surface temperature of that wood. That paint is going to super dry when it hits that hot surface. Okay? I hope that is what she was talking about.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Could be in Arizona or whatever.
Yeah.
It's hot all over right now. So I want to spray this maple door quickly, and then we can move on because daylight's a burning. Again, really nice quality, solid maple doors. I'm going to sand the one door. I use the cabinet grade sander that we have from Surf Prep because of the way these profiles work. I'm going to sand the door with this, but I sanded this door with this sander here, okay? And I'm going to spray, and then we'll talk in a minute. Again, stain blocker. I want to show you a quick tip. I'm going to shoot my final pass at a diagonal, and I'll explain why here in a second. Exhaust. Okay. It just sprays beautiful. I love how this product lays down. It actually sprays nice and even and uniform. It's unusual for a primer to spray like this, but because of the way the product was engineered, I sprayed that right out of the can. What's really nice about it though is it atomizes extremely well. I'm just spraying with an HVLP gun system. I have it in a turbine system, but the point is you don't have to reduce it. You can spray it out of the can. But what I wanted to show you is that final diagonal pass helps me get rid of these shadow lines that I get on these straight lines. So like the hardest part is getting it down into the bead, but on all of the corners, the diagonal pass lays your paint over an angle that covers your tracks. So anytime you're spraying, we're spraying the stain blocker, but the stain blocker itself will spray just as good as the white poly or the melt paint or the clear poly. It's just a great product. This product can be brushed and rolled also. So it's a little bit more universal than just a traditional cabinet grade lacquer. Okay, we're going to let this one dry. Now I'm going to tell you though, because this is a unique resin system, we want to let it dry this will be dry in an hour. It's warm here today, but I'm going to show you sanding it is kind of key too, and it doesn't really require a heavy sanding. And we'll come back and shoot that door. So, any questions on the stain blocker? Okay, because we'll move on and grab my next door. Now I shot this door at 11:30 and it's 2:30. You know, that's just the one coat on the same maple door. But from a sanding perspective, you would usually think about, I'm going to use the Merlon pads, and I'll show you why. I can take and I'll sand with my Surf Prep sander, but this is the unusual thing about stain blocker. It gets pretty hard, and it's hard because of the resin system that's designed in there. But it also has a couple of additives that actually fortifies it, makes it hard too. So it doesn't powder like white undercoat powders, just like a lacquer. It has so much filler in it. But I'm going to show you that, and people call up and the first thing that they think is they have to sand this thing to like a, smooth as a baby seal. So we're going to get to, I'm going to use the Merlon pads and just give it a light scuff. That's really all I'm going to do with it. And the reason for that is, if you look at it, I'm not really pulling any kind of powder off of this. I'm just getting a light scuff sand on it, and after that I'm done. I don't have to worry about sanding it smooth to a point that it's actually powdered. I have a big thumbprint up here, but that's okay because we're going to paint over that.
We got a quick question from
Yep.
Jeff. He wants to know, is stain blocker water cleanup on a gun?
So it is a water-based product, so that means it can be cleaned up with water. I will caution you that it will bond and stick to metal surfaces if you don't clean your gun. It's just because of the unique chemistry system in here. If you let this in your gun overnight and you come back tomorrow, you're going to spend the first hour of your day cleaning your gun with brush and gun cleaner because it will bond to metal. But I will say that I'm done here today. I'm going to flush this with water, hot water, and then I'll run some brush and gun cleaner through it and actually clean it up, and you're ready to go for your paints. That's a good question. Just so you know, all of these products are water-based. They're all soap and water cleanup, but when you're done spraying, clean your equipment. Because most people's problems end up being that their equipment is dirty or their equipment isn't clean enough, and then they can't get the paint to flow, and they call General Finishes. So and I'm going to chastise you for not having a clean gun. Okay? I want to show you though about the sanding process here too. So, little surf prep sander. They're designed to fit for the cabinet. So I'm going to do this here. Okay. That little sander detail fits into the corners. It fits in nice and tight to the right angles. It gets down into the grooves. It's a great little product if you're doing a lot of kitchen cabinet doors. Okay, that's a great product by Surf Prep. All right, now I want to move on to my white poly. Okay, and I'm going to wipe this off with my tack cloth. I have apparently a dirty thumb because I left a giant thumbprint, but that's okay because we're going to spray right over that. So now, it's smooth to the touch, but I'm not worried about sanding it aggressively. I want to just knock it down. So both the 220 flexible sanding pads, we use these from this aluminum oxide pad, and we want to go to the Merlon pad for cutting in. And the reason I don't use sandpaper, this is just personal, but maybe you'll understand. Sandpaper, you can easily cut off the corners and burn through your paint. I'd prefer to use something soft from this point forward, so if I have to get aggressive, I don't cut through my corners and expose the raw wood again and then have to do a repair on it. Okay? Marcy.
Peter from Edinburgh asks,
Peter.
what are the advantages of GF stain blocker over shellac stain blockers?
Well, hey Peter, how you doing? It's, what, 8:30 over there, so I'm hoping you're enjoying a pint. Shellac is a wonderful primer. In fact, it's one of the universal primers. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that to develop a water-based system, we ended up on this system because it was the only water-based primer that we tested, probably 13, if not more, commercially available water-based primers, and they all failed the red dye test. That board that I had with the red dye on it, the short one, Chris, is there a small one there? There we go. This is the red dye test. So everything we made, we put it over red dye. And out of all of them, the only one in water-based that outperformed the shellac and the oil was the stain blocker. Okay? You see it? That worked good? So we tested everything over red Merlot dye. Okay? So I'm just going to say, if you're using, if you found a primer that works really well for you, then by all means, the point of this is we have one for our system that works with all of our products. And that's a hard thing to find with companies that may have one or two products that work well, but if you go to the lengths of having to find a primer, we got two different ones that work for most all applications, okay? Nice to hear from you, Peter. All right, I'm going to spray, now we're going to shift gears here a little bit, and I'm going to go talk about, I'm going to just step over here, and talk about our pigmented top coats. Sorry about that, moved out of camera for you.
Sorry.
There we go. Jackrabbit moves on camera, a bad thing. This is our Enduro White Poly. This is our pigmented cabinet grade finish. It's an acrylic urethane. It's hard, it's durable. It's not house paint. It's completely different. It'd be more like your traditional solvent-based pigmented lacquers. Dries fast. It doesn't have the filler content that a paint system does. So it gives you a nice, clean, crisp, white, brilliant finish. And in combination with our white undercoat or stain blocker, it's an easy way to produce a factory quality finish. So a lot of people are discovering it, but it's been around in the market for quite a while. This can be also custom tinted to pretty much any fan deck color that we're aware of. We have about 60 of them in our files, but we tint colors every day. So, you know, any Benmore, Sherwin-Williams, Fine Paints of Europe's, Farrell and Ball, any good quality paint fan deck, we should be able to match it to a point to where they're almost close enough to where you won't be able to tell the difference between the manufacturers and ours. A lot of cabinet shops like it because, again, it's part of our system and they don't have to get out of the system to use a house paint. I had a customer call this morning. It was a perfect example, just before we went on camera. Went into a home that was built 15 years ago, originally had an oil-based paint on it. A crew come in and they used a very high quality primer, bonding primer over the oil base, then put on a high quality latex paint, which started to bubble and peel because of the system, and then tried to come in and wanted to fix it, so he was going to use our white poly. So we just had to kind of coach him through the point that you understand you've got 4 different manufacturers' products down. You need to prep and prime properly and let that dry before you move on to the pigmented white poly. So it's a great cabinet quality product, but again, I'm going to say understand what you're building and understand what you're using when it comes to other manufacturers' products compatibility. Okay? So we got several different pigmented lines. We have the milk paints, which are real popular, but today we're going to focus on the white poly because then it doesn't require a top coat. So we're going to spray the door, which I've primed, and we're going to spray with white poly, and it'll be dry in the next 1 to 2 hours, and then we'll let it sit, and it'll be a finished project here. Again, normally 2 coats of primer, normally 1 to 2 coats of paint, depending upon the film build that you're looking for. Okay? So I'm going to shoot this with white poly. I'm going to switch guns. I have a turbine system, so I've got the Fuji Mini Mite with the white poly satin in it, and I'm going to spray with a HVLP turbine system here. Okay? I'm going to put my mask on and spray this door. All right. HVLP, right out of the can, unreduced, about a 3 to 5 mil wet film. And what I'm looking for is if I could stand this door and not have any vertical sags from it. So it's sprayed just nice and even and uniform. Not heavy, not flooded on. And that's going to give me a couple of things. It's going to give me a much quicker dry time. So if you don't pile the paint on, it'll dry quicker. But then it's also going to come back, and over the next hour to 2 hours, the paint's going to continue to resolve and pull tight and shrink. So if I see an anomaly, or if I did get a run, I could come back now with a brush and take out a run. But I'm going to let this thing sit now and be done to a point to where by the end of the day, then I could flip this over and come back and paint the backside and move it. Do you see the sheen? Can you see the level of The product sprays just beautiful off the gun, unreduced out of the can. It's a great product. It really is a great system. And then you can get custom colors available. So, in a nutshell, that's basically paint and primers. And I could show you different paints and different products to spray, but white paint on camera is white paint. I wanted to really show you a system. If I'm doing a kitchen, whether it be existing or if I'm doing brand new doors, this is a brand new maple door, you've got yourself a system. And that is, I think, long term, it gives you confidence that what you're doing and just the knowledge knowing that we've done our work to put together a product that's high quality enough for you to be able to go out and professionally, you know, do a good job. So this is our pigmented system. We do have a third one in here, the brushable white enamel. And both the white enamel and the Enduro White Poly, the pigmented, they don't require a top coat. And that is critical because as time goes on, a lot of people, they'll want to put a clear finish over top of a white. The minute you put a clear finish on a white film, it's going to actually slowly change color. And you can't stop that. It's nothing you did wrong. It's just a combination of paint and clear coats, okay? Except for dark colors. Marcy, question.
Sharon wants to know, so I don't have to paint first with milk paint before using white poly. Does it have enough pigment to give me a good coverage?
Well, that's a good point. So are you saying, Karen, are you saying you'd put milk paint down first and then white poly on top of it?
Yes.
Because in a sense, there's nothing wrong with it, but there's no need to do that. Okay. The white poly is opaque. It's, again, it's a solid white film. The difference between the two of them are milk paint has a filler package in it. So it has a tendency to fill over existing finishes. That's where we would use, again, our stain blocking primer and our white poly. That's the system that's going to get you a solid opaque finish without worrying about having anything coming through later on the color. Because milk paint doesn't stop bleed through, as I showed you on that red board. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Anybody else today? If anybody, if you want to, make sure you let your friends know, send them the link, share them the link to this video, have them go on generalfinishes.com and watch our videos. We're on YouTube. You can go through and find every specific product that we have. We have a production video as far as product knowledge, and then we have application videos. So if you have questions about it, if you can't find them on there, you can go to our generalfinishes.com and look at our FAQ section, which covers almost every topic you could think of because they've called and asked us these questions before. All right? That's good stuff. It's a great product. Give it a try. Thanks for joining us today.